Ladies and gentlemen, justice. Is served. Good morning, everybody. We're here again at Reese and Ray's in downtown Sydney, Montana for episode number 2651 of Justice is Served. Today's dish is going to be called Cellmate spinach bread. And you can make whatever you want out of that. It doesn't make a difference. And of course, you know, we started doing little things, tips of the day at the beginning of the show, because this just isn't just a cooking show. We want people to come out of here with good tips and have a little bit of fun while we're doing it. And our tip for today is this, and think about this very carefully. Money cannot buy you happiness, but I'll guarantee you, crying in a Mercedes is a lot better than crying in a 78 Ford 3/4 ton pickup, all right? And then we always have a mondegreen. Everybody knows what a mondegreen is if you've watched the show before. It's a butchered song lyrics. So, and we always try to get one that everybody can kind of relate to, or they've heard in their lifetime, or they will. And today's, as everybody remembers the Beatles back in the 70s when it, you know, was "We All Live in a Yellow Submarine." Well, again, growing up on a farm in a tractor and your hearing wasn't that good and the radio was blasting, we just kept singing, "We all live in the other submarine." So whatever they were doing, Navy, they probably really liked that. Okay, now again, today it's Cellmate spinach bread. Now one thing about this spinach bread, I've made it before. I'll go back a little bit. 10, 15 years ago, we had a judges conference in Lewistown, Montana. And they just reopened a new restaurant, well, not a new one, but they reopened a restaurant up there called The Mint. And we happened to be up there one night, and the chef was sitting there. We got to discussing some things, and he used to pheasant hunt down here in Sydney. We got talking about that, and then we got talking recipes. And I said, I had a great pheasant recipe, and I said, but you can make it with chicken, and the conversation went on and on. And I told him, I said, hey, if you want to do this, we could make it up. I could probably guarantee you half of the judges would show up, which would have been about 60 of us. And he said, well, let's do it. So we did a chicken and marinara sauce. I usually do it with pheasant. And he had a homemade marinara sauce recipe, but then I did the spinach bread. And this spinach bread, he goes, that's interesting. I said, it's fantastic. You can do it as an hors d'oeuvre, you can make a meal out of it. Depends on what you wanted to add to it. But when I told him the main ingredients in the spinach bread, he sat there, and any chef will tell you, when you start thinking Velveeta cheese, he just rolled his eyes. And I said, trust me on this deal. So I'm going to ask everybody else out there to trust me on this deal. Now the ingredients are French bread. You want a good loaf of French bread. Everybody likes this. This is fresh baked right here at Reese and Ray's back there. Oh, I got a question. Has anyone ever actually seen Reese or Ray? I always hear about Reese or Ray, but I kind of think they're like an income tax refund check or a Yeti. You always hear about them, but no one ever sees them. So anybody out there right now, and Reese and Ray, if you're out there, I'm challenging you. You come here and you be with me on a show in your grocery store, and we'll make you guys the sous chefs. All right, one of the things you want to do right off the bat, get your French bread. All right. And then what we're going to do is we're going to cut it in half. Don't be bent out of shape if, you know, one's a little thicker than the other. Oh boy. Now, I don't split them apart for a reason. I try to keep them hooked up right there. Now we want to go ahead and put that right on the tray. And what we're going to do with that French bread is we're going to take some butter. And we have butter fresh churned right from the back room back here. And they've got a nice little packager, as you can see. And if I could see, I could open up this butter just like that. Now what you want to do is you want to butter both halves of the French bread, and you want to do a real good job of that, because one of the other ingredients is spinach. And you use a frozen spinach, you thaw it out, and then you wring all of the juice out of it. And the reason you want to wring all the juice out of it is it's going to go on top of this bread, and if there's any water that's left in that spinach, it would leak down in the bread and make a real mushy spot in there, which it doesn't look that good for the presentation. It doesn't really make a difference on the taste, but the presentation is everything. So what the butter does is that insulates that water from going down into the bread. That's just a little tip, breadology there. Now this is low calorie, low cholesterol butter, not a problem. Okay, now what I'm going to do is, the reason I'm doing this a little bit earlier is I want that butter to have a chance to kind of soak into that bread and make that layer, so it protects it from any water, because you can't get all of the water out of that spinach. And I've used fresh spinach before, but I've found in these dishes the frozen spinach works so much better. Okay, now, part of the Holy Trinity, onions. Okay, what we're going to do here is we're going to dice up these onions. Now my wife, she's a little picky when it comes to her onions. And she says, you know, I don't mind the taste, but if there's big chunks, I don't like the texture of a big chunk of onion. So when I do this spinach bread, I use this little chopper over here. And that way it finely chops those onions so that when we saute them with the garlic and with the Velveeta cheese, it makes, there is no texture in there that even the most defining palate can sit there and complain about. I guess complaining is such a harsh word. It's, in my house, it's more constructive criticism. Sans the constructive. Okay, now, what I'm going to do, okay, we're going to chunk these onions up because they chop better in that little food processor. You know what I like? I love the smell of onions and garlic. Okay, again, this dish can be just an hors d'oeuvre, or you can make a meal out of it. If you wanted to make a meal, you know, I make a lot of homemade sausage, and hunting season comes, we make lots of sausages, but then we make our regular, like our chorizo, Italian, breakfast, German, and all of that. This dish affects me so much, I always cry when I'm cooking, and the onions don't help it much. Okay, what we're going to do is we're going to put some of those in there. Actually, we're going to put them all in, but we got to do it in batches. Like that. And we're going to chop those up really fine. All right. Now, in one of the last shows, I told you about a gentleman that, you know, we protected his name, you know, keep him innocent, and so we called him Michael. We're going to call him Michael again. Michael came to my house the other night because he saw the show and asked me if I was making fun of him, and I said no. You know, and we started chatting about some of the past cooking classes that we've had. Well, Michael one day called me up, and it's kind of funny because he calls me Gweg because of his accent. And he called me up and he said, well, Gweg, are we going to have the cooking class? And I said, well, yeah, we are. Well, then Michael goes, well, it's not in the newspaper. I've been reading the newspaper, and there's no cooking class in the newspaper. I said, well, it's in there, Michael, but they've renamed it the Culinary Arts class. And he goes, Culinary Arts, evidently, the country that he's from, they don't have culinary arts, they have cooking classes. So he sat there and he wanted to know why they would even do anything like that. Of course, I didn't have the answer for it. So I'm going to continue to make fun of Michael, but we're protecting his name. Okay, now if you'll see the texture of those onions right there. Right there. There's not a big chunk that someone's going to get. It's good and it's fine. And this might seem to some people that don't like onions like it's a lot, but it's not. When this cooks down, I guarantee you, it makes a great sauce. Now again, I was saying you can make a meal out of this, and you can take and put sausage, whatever sausage you would like, homemade or bought, and put it on top of it, so you've got a meat part to it. You could put vegetables, black olives, technical difficulties. We're going to need to go get a school kid here. And if I break this, oh boy, I would hate to have to face my wife. Well, you know, you're cooking, stuff goes wrong all the time. And one thing about cooking is this. It's not what you know, it's what you know you can get away with. All right, now, we got to plug it in. Ah. Okay, now we're all making this come together right here. Ah, look at all that. Okay, we've got a great batch of onions in there. We've got to make sure you get that put back together. Now, the other part, garlic. Ah. You know, I like to use fresh garlic instead of, you know, the granulated or the dried. You can use whatever you happen to have. But I've got it, I grow it in my garden. You know, of course, here we've got it to store because they supply everything for the show, which we thank you so very much for. I mean, this is a great place. You get to go shopping, or if you yell back, Bruce is usually back here. Bruce runs the kitchen back here, and when I need something, I just yell Bruce, and he comes out, and I ask him if I can have something, you know, and he just goes, whatever, all right, great, not a problem. Now, you can't have enough garlic and you can't have enough onions in anything. I mean, you've got to give it the flavor. There's no doubt about it. So I'm going to use a little extra garlic here. And when you're taking the skins off the garlic, it gets a little messy. I try not to get the skins in the dish. Now you can, if you want to change this dish a little bit too, if you've ever baked garlic cloves, when you bake a garlic clove, I'm not supposed to do this. There's Bruce. How you doing, Bruce? All right, man. My wife sits there and says, don't pull that knife out on TV again. I said, hey, these are judicial issue. Every judge in the state gets one. All right, man. This is the guy right here. This is my go-to guy. When I go back, I just yell, hey, Bruce, can I have some of this or something like that? And he just gives me what I want.
So I hear you giving me a hard time over here.
No, sir. No, sir, I wouldn't do that. No. Size is the difference here.
There you go.
All right, man. Thank you. Okay. Now, I'm taking the ends off of those. But again, if you wanted to change the texture or the flavor of this dish, if you've ever baked a garlic clove, they've got little terracotta garlic baker things. I've got one. And what you do is you take the whole clove, and the garlic that I raise at home is called elephant garlic. The heads are about like my fists, and the cloves are about like my thumb. And what you do is you just take the top off of it, drizzle a little olive oil on that, and then bake it. And then when you get done, you sit there and you take it and you just squeeze those cloves, and that garlic comes out, and it's like a really good baked flavor. It changes the flavor of the garlic, and you can add that in here if you want to do it that way. But again, like I said, making this a meal, when we're done, you can put the sausage over the top of it, or someone that wants to make it a vegetarian dish, broccoli, cauliflower, tomatoes, whatever you want to put on there, to give it whatever flavor. And like I said, you can make it a meal. Now, in football games, a lot of times, I'll make 3 or 4 of these and then put different things so everybody can taste and see what they like the best. Now, in these shows, I mention my wife once in a while. You know, she's kind of my constructive criticism type critic. The other night, we were sitting out on our deck, and we were enjoying a glass of wine, just watching over our backyard. We fixed it up kind of nice because it's private, and, you know, you can kind of enjoy each other's company, because as you get older and your kids leave the house, you know, the noise level goes down, and it actually is really quiet. And you finally bring yourself to the realization that you're actually going to have to talk to her, because there's nobody else to talk to. Anyway, we were sitting there sipping wine, and she just sat there and she said, you know something? I love you so very much, I just don't know how I'd get along without you. You know, and I looked at her and I said, for all the criticisms that you've given me over the years, that's the nicest thing you could have said to me. She just looked at me and said, don't let your head get too big, I'm talking to the wine. All right, we're getting the skins off of these. Now here's another thing, you know, like I said, when you're cooking, I love the smell of onions and garlic. That'll stay on my fingers for probably the rest of the afternoon. It's just that when I go back to my other job, it wouldn't be good to be sitting on the bench going like that, I guess, all day. Now, just a minute, we'll have all these little buggers done. Now, don't you agree that knife is better than something like that, especially if you knew how handy I was? Okay. Yeah, should we put a couple more in there? I don't know, what do you think? Show of hands out there. More garlic? Yeah? Yeah, all right. I want to recognize my Ekalaka groupies over here. These people drive up here every week just to see the show. Must not be a lot to do in Ekalaka. Got a little piece of skin in there. No big deal. Okay, now, you know, this child-proof stuff can be real aggravating. I guess you got to put the components in there. That's the whirligig. That's the technical name for it. What? I know some of you out there would doubt it, but I do have a college education. I got a piece of paper. And with all my culinary expertise, my piece of paper says animal science. All right, now we've got the garlic chopped up in there. And it doesn't bother me, you know, to clean this out because these things are all going and the flavors meld together. Okay, now we've got the garlic and the onion. Look how that went back together that time. I better buy a lottery ticket. Something worked here. Okay, now, we're going to have to go back. We're going to saute this, so we'll go in the back room. We're going to take the rest of the butter and saute that in butter, but then the key ingredients in spinach bread is spinach. Okay, now, don't let that, this is medicinal spinach. And then the way it works in the legal system for chain of custody is if you break the seal, then you have to initial it just in case if you get called to court because you got to tell everybody who did what, when, where, and why. So we're going to take the medicinal spinach back into the kitchen along with this and the ingredient that makes everybody cringe, that's a chef, Velveeta cheese. So if you'll come with me in the back, we're going to get that going. And we'll finish this dish up. All right, here. I always sing to myself when I'm cooking a lot of times, but again, the mondegreens kind of come out and then everybody wonders if you're okay. You know, a lot of times I pretty much try to act normal most of the time, but then that gets really boring, so I just go back to being the original me. All right, now, see how that butter is sitting there and bubbling? We're going to get those onions and that garlic in there. Again, now, this seems like a lot of onions and a lot of garlic, but it's not. Okay, you see where all that butter, it soaked it right up? I might need to go get a little more butter. Now, while we're watching that, I am going to sit there. And the key ingredient, the Velveeta cheese. Now, when I was a kid, we used to feast on Velveeta cheese and Spam sandwiches. You think about that now, and everybody goes, ew, back then, hey, that was prime rib. All right. Okay, I'll be right there. What we're going to do is chunk up the Velveeta, just like this, in chunks about like that, because it'll melt faster. We can get it in with our onions and our spinach. Now, you can use Mexican Velveeta, or you can put jalapenos if you like it a little hotter. Anything that you want to put in there to change it. Again, recipes, just a base. You know, a lot of times we'll look at them and go, well, that sounds good, but we like something a little better. Did you see that catch? Ah. That's ready. Oh, back to those onions. Look at that. My goodness. You know, it's really distracting to try to cook back here, because if you look over my right shoulder, you got about 20 chickens that are turning, you know, and you kind of want to sample. Hey, is it against the rules if I open this door over here and sample on these chickens?
No, sir.
I like you, man. Put your loaf, you know, put them in the refrigerator. You can even freeze them if you want. But the cheese will kind of break up a little bit when it's freezing, but as you bake it, it'll come right back in. If you were expecting, you know, a bunch of guests, you know, planning a family reunion and you just, or, you know, a family dinner, and you wanted to have a good hors d'oeuvre right there real quick. Ah, yeah, I love the way that's cooking down. You're always watching Larry on TV, you know, when they take that and then they flip it. You ever seen me do that? That's why they got this hood up here, because then we just catch it as it drips back down off of there. Now, as that dries out, and it's doing that, you know, you can see as that moisture is leaving it, I'm going to start adding the spinach here in a minute. Now you can start seeing, I see a little brown fleck there. That's what I like. I like caramelization on that onion as much as possible. Okay, now we're starting. There's not a lot of water left in that, so we're going to let it just sit there and kind of do its thing. And then the medicinal spinach. You want to sign off on this thing with me too, Larry? So, you know, I don't want to hang alone on this deal, dude. Okay. Medicinal spinach. Now look, hey, if you can get rid of that for me, I sure would appreciate that, you know. Here's a key legal tip of the day. No evidence, no crime. Okay, now, we're putting that spinach right in with those onions. Look at that. This recipe came from an old friend of mine down in Louisiana. He was an old submarine commander. And this guy, I swear, he's got sauces, he's got recipes down there. He got one sauce, you could pour it over a cow pie and you'd think it was gourmet food. Okay, now you see the steam there. We pretty much got the water out of the onions, but whatever water's left in the spinach is leaving now pretty quick right there. Now you don't want to cook that to where there's burnt pieces in it, so now, Velveeta cheese. people have asked me, have you used other cheeses? Well, got friends from Wisconsin that come up that always bring me all kinds of cheeses, and the thing about it is yes, I've used other cheeses, but here's the thing. This stuff is so good, don't use the high dollar cheese. And then when I get a recipe, you know, I'll mess with the ingredients as far as the spices, the onions, and the garlic, but when someone's got this thing together and it works, don't mess with something that works. Remember, Velveeta cheese. I wonder what that name's supposed to be. Velveeta. Anybody know? Somebody Google that or whatever and let me know. Oh, another thing too, I had a few people call me and say, hey, you know, we've watched the show, we really like it. I like to hear that. Like I said before, if you got complaints, you go to www.mrc-tv.com. If you got compliments, you just call me personally. Not a problem. But they said, where's the recipes? So what they've told me is that they're going to put that on the website. So check the Mid-Rivers website. All right, now you see how that Velveeta is starting to meld in there with everything? And pretty soon it's just going to be a sauce that's really thick. The onions, the garlic, the spinach. Now you could put a little more butter in this right here, but it's coming along really good. Oh yeah. And if you're stirring it, you know, when you get down towards the bottom, if it's getting hot and it looks like it's going to scorch, you know, if you've got smaller pieces of the Velveeta in there like that, it's nothing to worry about, because we're going to bake it for about 15 minutes just to put the finishing touches, because we put mozzarella on top of it. All right. That is actually ready to go. So, we're going to head back out. This is Cellmate spinach bread. Could make a couple more comments, but you'd have to cut them out. We talked about it back in the kitchen, Larry and I did. See, the fun thing about doing this is I divide and separate these cameramen, you know. So we talk about the one when we're back there, and then when we come back out there for Larry, I talk about him, you know. So, hey, we're good on that. All right? So the cheese bit. I got friends from Wisconsin that bring out cheese because people have asked before. Again, you know, well, do you use fancy cheese on this? And you can, but like I said back there, the fancy cheese, why use it? Use the Velveeta because the recipe's so darn good. But yes, I've used it with different cheeses like smoked Gouda, you know, what you can't use Longhorn. And then it's really funny watching people eat it because the strings will come down and stick to their face. You know, so it's an entertainment thing too, other than just a food. And again, if you wanted to make it a meal, think about this. Put your sausage on top. You could do whatever sausage you have. If you have your own homemade or what you buy back here, great. Kielbasa, chicken bits, whatever, black olives. Again, we've used, here. For the people that don't want meat on it, tomatoes, broccoli, cauliflower. All right, now, are we going? Okay. Everybody's going around here, but I'm going to tell you something like this. Hey, Doris, this one's a keeper.